So last week we covered about half the alphabet, and this week we'll cover the second half and some special letters once we're done with that. So I'll review the first half and then we'll go through the second half. Aleph, which makes no sound, Beit, Gimel, Daled, Hey, Vav, which can be a W sound as well. In ancient times it was. Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yod, Kaf, Lamed, Mem, Nun, Samek, Ayin, Pei, Tzadeh, Kof, Resh, Sin, Shin, Tau. So the Tau and the Tet, where's the Tet? Both make a T sound. The Kof and the Kaf both make a K sound. And the Aleph and the Ayin, for our purposes, don't make any sound. They did, of course, but it's very hard for an English ear to pick that up. So that's the alphabet. And before we talk about the special letters, I would just like to show you a little bit about writing each letter. So last week we stopped after Kaf, and now we come to Lamed. And Lamed, as you can see, is the only letter that goes above the line. So it's just a line down, over, and curve down. So a Lamed. And then Mem, there's different ways to write it, different font styles, of course, but I write it with a curve and a cross and a line through. That's the Mem. And then the Nun, just straight down and over. Again, a lot of times in printed fonts, you're going to see little flourishes, like we talked about last week. Just like in English, you know, a lowercase g, we write by hand like this. But in a printed thing, you're going to see a lowercase g, something like that. Or, you know, this little flourish here you don't need for an A, different things. So a lot of times you're going to see, just like at the top of a Vav, you see a little thing, you're going to see the same thing at the top of a Nun and over. You don't need that. I think if you're writing quickly, it could make someone think you're writing a Kaf. So I think it's best just to go straight down with the foot. There's different ways, and eventually you'll get used to reading multiple fonts and multiple people's handwritings in Hebrew, just like you do in English. So there's the Nun, then there's the Samek. I forgot to mention that the Samek and the Sin make the same sound, an S sound. And we talked about Ayin, just come down, over, and there. You need to come up with little memory devices for yourself for how to remember these. Now, this is a crazy one, but when I was 18 and I was learning these letters for the first time, I pictured the Ayin as though it was a little scoop. You know, so you could scoop out your eyeball. Ayin. Yeah, that's the type of thing an 18-year-old boy would come up with. But that helped me remember the name of that letter. Also, ayin happens to be the word for eye or spring. So your eye is your spring of your tears and a spring of water. So associating this letter with the eyeball also helped. You got to come up with little memory devices. If you're just trying to do brute rote memory constantly, it's going to be frustrating, and it's too much work. It's too much effort. You have to make it fun for yourself. And then the Pei, of course, with the dot, it's going to be a P, and without the dot, it's going to be a PH sound. We'll come back to that over and over again. Let's try to keep our line going a little straight. Tzadeh looks like a little scythe, you know, like the Grim Reaper sweeps in harvesting. So you can think of that as a scythe if you want to help you remember that. But you see the little thing, the blade, and they have that little handle there. The tzadeh. The kof just makes a k sound. Just remember not to connect them. If you connect them, you might think it looks like an English P, but it's just a curved line. It's almost like a semicircle, except the top goes a little further, and then there's a line in there. That's the kof. Let's make a new line for some of these letters. So you've got the resh, just a r sound, and then you've got seen and sheen. You'll see those look all kinds of different ways. If you were writing with a flourish, you might have, this is kind of a famous letter that you'll see, you might have it looking like that. But either way, you got that with the line going that way. The important thing is that you think of seen and sheen as two different letters. So you've got seen and sheen, just depending on where the dot is. Now, of course, in ancient times, it may have been considered the same letter at different stages in the history. The seen one is much more rare. Probably the only reason this stayed in the alphabet is because it's in a very key word to Hebrew, and that's Israel. But there's a whole history behind these letters, and that's not important for us today. So, seen and sheen. Now, this letter is much more common. For one thing, they already have the samek to make the S sound, so it's much more rare. The sheen is the more common one. Maybe a way you could remember that is that the more rare one is in the smaller pocket, and the more common one is in the larger pocket. You'll see in some printed text they won't put it over the pocket, they'll put it over the line, but it's not that hard to get used to that. And then when we come to the last letter, tau. The important thing is that you have that little foot, because otherwise it's going to look like a chet. Looks like a little music note or something there. Tau. You could remember that in music class in elementary school. The teacher's going ta ta ti ti ta. So tau looks like a little music note. Makes a t sound, just like tet. So that's the whole alphabet. And now let's get to some special letters. So the first set of special letters are the ones that get a pronunciation dot. And I have put a red dot in each of those to show that if they have the dot, they're pronounced one way, and if they don't, they're pronounced a different way. So the first one is bait, which we covered. If it's got a dot, it's a b sound. If it doesn't have a dot, it's a v. So you've got essentially, in English terms, a B or a V. The dot gets that. Another one is a P, and I skipped to that one because it's a similar situation in which the dot, the pronunciation dot, represents the labial explosion, we call it, with your lips. So so you've got with the dot, it's a p, and without the dot, it's just a f. There's no p. Same thing here. B. There's a labial explosion. The only difference is it's vocalized. You start your vocal cords before the p. So you got vocalization builds up. B. Okay? Without that, it's just vocalized the whole time. So that's the difference here. The V and the PH. Just the vocal cords here. But anyway, so those are the two important ones, and those are the only two that really affect our English pronunciation. These other letters here, we're not going to actually change the pronunciation. You do need to know that in ancient times, of course, the dot would change them, because you'll see a dot in the letter and say, why is that letter there? Oh, that was a pronunciation dot. So a way to remember which letters could get it, we call them the Bagad Kafat letters, because B, G, D, Bagad, K, F, T, Kafat, the Bagad Kafat letters. It's just a way to remember, why am I seeing a dot in that? Oh, that's because it's a Bagad Kafat letter, and it could be a pronunciation dot. Okay, so that's one set of special letters, Bagad Kafat letters. All you need to know is you might see a dot in them sometimes, and it could be a pronunciation dot. And the other set of special characters are the ones that have a final form. What I mean is, certain letters, 5 letters, are written differently if they come at the end of a word. So, in English, if you write a word, whether it comes at the beginning, middle, or end, it's written the same, the 2 Ds, right? And that's how most of the Hebrew letters are, but there are 5 of them that are written differently if they come at the end of the word. And the reason for that is because paper was so expensive that they would cram all the words together. And so often there were no spaces between the letters. So if a letter ended differently, at the end of a word, then it helped the reader know, okay, that's the end of a word. Even though there's no space, I know that's the end of a word. So it's just a helpful mechanism for them to avoid miscommunication or misunderstanding in reading it. So those letters are the letters that have a final form. The first one is kaf, which has could have a pronunciation now, but if it comes at the beginning of a word, of course they write this way. It's going to be, like that. Or if it's in the middle, it's going to be like that. But if it's in the end, it comes down and hangs. It's like a hinge here, and it hangs down. And then mem is another one. So there's a final form one, a final form one. I'm going to come to mem at the end. We'll go to nun. So nun, at the beginning of a word is like that. At the end of the word, it just hangs down. Okay? A lot of the final forms, 4 out of 5 of them, just hang down longer. Pay, same thing. The beginning of a word or at the end of a word. So if it was, the word peep, it would be written like that. Peep. Anyway, we haven't done vowels yet, but don't worry about that. And then also tsade, at the beginning of a word is like that. And at the end of the word, I wrote it the same. At the end of a word, this hangs down. So tsade at the end of the word looks like that. And then mem, I'm going to say mem. I say mem for last because it's the only one that doesn't hang down. It closes up. So mem, and in a final form, mem just looks like a box, basically. So I like to think of it like they take this line and they connect it and close it up into a box. It's just something that helped me remember when I was first learning this. But anyway, the point is, if you were going to write the word mom or mim or meme, you would spell it like this. Or if you were going to say, me mom or something like that, all the mems would look like this until you got to the final one and it would look like a box. I made that a little bit large, but you get the idea. So that's the alphabet. There's 6 letters, the Begad-Kafat letters, that could be pronounced different ways, although only 2 of them affect us today, the bait and the pay. And the rest, our English ears can't really hear the difference, so we don't worry about it. And then there's 5 letters that are written, shaped differently if they come at the end of a word.